In this video, we're looking at how useful peg stamps can be and just how versatile you could find them to use in your card designs. We'll be looking at this card designed by Kat Waskett for Papercraft Inspirations magazine and going through the steps you need to build up this design for yourself using the peg stamps. We're going to be building the wreath on a 12cm square of white card. The first thing we're going to do is draw a rough pencil outline that we're going to follow with the stamping. I'm using an 8.5cm diameter circle. This is just a die cut that I've trimmed. If you've got a die of this size, you can always use the die directly if you like, or any round object you've got. You might have a tape that measures about 8.5 centimeters in diameter. I'm going to draw it in pencil because once we've done the stamping, we want to be able to rub this guideline out later on. The peg stamps that we're going to be using for this card are from the Last Order's Majestic stamp set, which you can buy from Cardio. Some brands of stamp are pre-mounted on wooden cylinders or pegs. The ones we're using here, as you see, they're plastic cling stamps, and we've got some acrylic pegs in different sizes that you can mount each of the stamps onto, depending on the size and the diameter of each design. We're starting with the largest leaf stamp in the set, and I'm inking this up with some olive ink. It's Memento ink pad. The thing, we're going to be using this double stamping technique, so you want to stamp the leaf twice each time you ink it up, so the second impression you get will be a lot lighter than the first. You're working your way round the circle. You can twist the peg stamp quite easily as you go round. The thing you want to avoid is the stamps looking too carefully placed, so be sort of as random as you can. You want to have a total of about 10 leaves spaced around the circle. The next stamp we're going to use is this small leafy scroll. Because of the size of this design, it won't fit onto any of these acrylic pegs, so I'm just using a small acrylic block to help me place this. The ink we're using for this one is Pistachio Memento ink. I'm stamping this around the circle again. You want to have about 5 or 6 impressions of this leafy scroll around your wreath, but I'm not using double stamping here, so each time I stamp I'm going to re-ink my stamp between each impression. That's just because it's such a large block of foliage, it's quite nice to have each one quite clearly defined. Next up, we're going to use the smaller leaf design back on one of the small acrylic pegs. And first up, we're going to ink this with pistachio ink. And we're going to stamp this around the wreath. You want about 10 impressions of this in this ink. And for this one, we're going to use the double stamping technique. So I'm stamping it twice before re-inking each time. This wreath only uses 4 different stamps in the whole of the wreath. The sentiment stamp is then added afterwards. But because we're using this double inking technique, you can see how you can build quite an elaborate looking scene using just 4 stamps. And as you get more confident with your peg stamping, you can add more stamps into the mix and create more elaborate designs. Sticking with the same small leaf stamp that we used for the last step, we're going to ink it up this time in Olive Grove Memento ink and stamp around the wreath, about 10 impressions you want this time, and we're going to use the double stamping technique so that you stamp twice before you re-ink each time. Now we're going to use pine cone ink and the small hop flower, and we're going to stamp about 8 times around the circle, stamping twice before re-inking each time. This is adding the pine cone type ornament to the design. Now you just want to fill any remaining gaps in the wreath with the small leaf stamp that we used before, using either Olive Grove or pistachio ink. If there's any areas that look like they haven't got quite enough, you can add these in now. Next, why don't you try experimenting with peg stamps to make your own background paper patterns, as Kat Waskett has done in this design, which you'll find in Papercraft Inspirations magazine.